I appreciate everybody being on here today. We're on here for our third episode of the Authors Roundtable. I'm excited to have some amazing guests on the show today. And what we're going to be talking about is, so you've written one book, why does the next one seem harder? Why does it seem harder to write that second book than it did the first one, maybe in some instances? We'll cover other topics as well. And the main point of this podcast is to help new authors as they get started. So again, I appreciate everybody being on here. I have with me today John St. Clair. So John, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, and maybe, if you've got your book, show the cover or something like that. And also go ahead and mention your latest work that you're working on.
Awesome. Thank you, David. My name is John St. Clair. I live in Reston, Virginia. I am an independent author, and I'm a proud member of the Twitter writing community. And I've met everyone on this call and previous calls and book clubs through Twitter. And I feel very privileged to be here. And again, I'm in the time sense a relatively new author. I've only been doing the writing thing for a few years, just 5 or 6 years. My first book came out in the spring of 2021. I can hold up a cover here. It might be reversed because of the image there, but it's called Stalin's Door. Of course, all our information, I think you can find at the information section where we're being hosted. So look for that. But I am working on a second book, which is apropos to the conversation we're having this evening. And again, very excited to be here. And thank you, David, so much for having us.
Very, very, very welcome. And yeah, the image came through perfectly. So can't wait. Hope everybody checks that out. In the show notes themselves, there's going to be different links to everyone's bio, to their Twitters, to Facebook, whatever I was given. Promise I didn't publish anybody's social security number. I use those for other reasons. That's why I asked for them, and your date of birth and all of that good fun stuff. Next, I'd like to introduce Christopher W. Brown, because I'm just going in the order that I had the information from. So Mr. Brown, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your book and how you got started and just a nice history.
Thank you so much, David, for inviting me to do this. I am relatively a new published author, independently published author. My book came out on September 3rd of this year, so less than a month and a half ago. So this is a new adventure for me. It is called Just Keep Talking, Lockdown, Podcasting, and Health. Just a brief backstory, so that way you can kind of get an idea of what the story is about. In 2020, I was diagnosed with a tumor on my occipital lobe of my brain. And during the lockdown of COVID-19, I sort of had radiation treatment, chemo, and all that fun stuff. And my father said, well, why don't you write a journal? And as someone who lost a job, I thought, well, let's tell a story. So as a former journalist, I wrote a sort of journal and turned it into a 120, 140 page book that has just been published, and people seem to be liking it. And I've sort of gotten the author itch now, and I literally opened up a new Word document, and as John said, it's apropos that we're talking about why is it so hard to write a second book, because, well, I can tell you I've been staring into that blank void of that page of Microsoft Word, and nothing seems to be coming out as much as it came out the first time. So I'm happy to be here. I hail from Calgary, Alberta in Canada, so I'm the Canadian contingent of this show today. So I'm proud to be here, and I'm looking forward to sort of meeting everyone virtually for over the next hour.
Nice. Appreciate you being on here. And then next we have Harriet, and it's Helfand. Did I pronounce that correct?
You did. That is correct. Thank you. Well, again, thank you for inviting me. I'm honored to be here today. I've been writing for a long, long time, and I did have one. I had a traditionally published children's book, but decided it was the hardest thing I ever wrote, and it was much easier for me to write adult fiction. So actually, a number of years ago, I started a book. I had a long legal career. I was a lawyer and a judge. And I've had a lot of different experiences and met a lot of different people. So I started this book a while ago. and that described some of the experiences I had had and, certain legal issues, and put it aside for a long time. And then during the pandemic, I had a lot more time, and I also had intimations of mortality. And because of that, I thought, I want to finish this book. And I did. And I self-published it because I felt like, why should I wait to see if somebody else wants it? I just want it out there and have the accomplishment. And I did it, and I'm happy with it. Although I just reissued it, and I'll show it to you here. It's a slightly different cover than I originally did, but it was all DIY at the time, including the photograph that I took with my iPhone. So I recently reissued it because, for the same reason that I think our topic revolves around, in that I learned so much after I published it. I learned so much about writing after reading other people's work, being in the Twitter writing community, studying writing, which I hadn't done before. I just kind of wrote. And then I learned a lot. And I think for that reason, I've done some major revisions. And today, actually, coincidentally, I uploaded my second novel. And I'll talk about later why that's, I think that it's topical, because one of the reasons it was so hard to do is because of everything that I learned. And I wanted to be so careful to do things, to write in a better way than I had written the first book. So look for it. I'll talk more about it later, but thanks again.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah. And it's one of those things that I think a lot of us may have the same issue when it comes to our second works and others down the road. So I can't wait to hear that. And so I started writing also during the COVID. So we'll come back to that, introducing me later. But first, I would like to introduce EP Stavs. And do you like to go by EP on this call, or would you like to go by Aaron, or how do you like to introduce yourself? And can you please tell us, a little bit about yourself and your work?
You can call me Aaron. So yeah, that'd be work. I have written these books. So I have gotten past the second book. Oddly enough, my second book was written in 3 months. It was the easiest one I wrote. So I might not have the same answers to these as you guys, but I write YA fantasy. That's what my main series in. I write fantasy romance or fairy tale romance. I have a thriller book. I write gothic horror short stories that I have published in The Crow's Quill, which is an online literary magazine. And I just all over the board, but mostly fantasy with some romance in it, like fantasy adventure with romance in it. And my first book is The Marked Princess. That was the first one I ever wrote.
Nice.
I did get new covers recently, but they're not up here. So, and that's it.
Yeah, that's a topic I want to talk about today, is covers as well. Because some of them I've went out and created new covers and all that good stuff. So I appreciate you, appreciate everybody being on here. If I look at your faces, then I'm not looking at the camera. So that's why I'm doing this. It's the bad part of having multiple monitors. So for me, I'm David Musser, and I write horror. So that's what I write. And I, like you, the second book and even the third one weren't difficult for me. They just seemed to flow. It was that fourth book that I just got stopped on. And one of the things I think about is I cared, right? And the first ones, the stories were just flowing, but then, like you had said, Harriet, it was one of those things that for me, it was I've researched so much now, I want to put all of that knowledge into something, right? So again, it's something that is, it's great for everybody to be here. I'll show mine. I've recently combined my first 3 novellas into volume 1. So for anybody listening, please check it out if you like horror. And I am self-published, so I try my best to tell a good story. Could it use extra work? Yes, I'm sure, but that's we try our best when we're independent authors. So what I'd like to do now is just open it up. Who would like to take the first first stab at, again, so you've written one book, why does it seem harder on the second? I think this was your topic, John. So why don't you take that?
Definitely. Thank you. And thank you for choosing this. I only came up with this because I think as published authors, we're either in this state now, or if you have multiple books, maybe you were in this state, or maybe it's all been easy and you're going to get to that state, or maybe you haven't published anything and you can't even imagine publishing a second one, much less your first one. But for me, it's been difficult because when I hit publish, I think Harriet said she just ordered her author's proof copy for her second book, maybe even today. I was very excited to do that. When I did that, I was actually not a part of the Twitter writing community. I wish I had been. I probably could have learned a whole lot of lessons that I learned the hard way. I could have maybe avoided a bunch of pitfalls and things. But for me personally, I was in a state of what I like to call maybe willful ignorance. There were so many things I thought I knew. Now looking back at this 18 months later, I know that I know nothing. I have learned so many lessons. There's things that I would love to pass on to first-time authors, or even people trying to write their second or third books, that would save them so much pain and anguish. And me coming into this it was just, like I said, it's willful ignorance. I thought that things had to be a certain way and that things would be easy and that you just hit publish and people would be beating down your door to read your work. And if you could just get it on Amazon, people would go and buy it, and your friends and family would tell all their friends and families, and you'd have a bestseller on your hands. And none of that happened. It's been an eye-opening experience. And that's just on the marketing side. On the writing side, and after reading a whole bunch of other, what I have to say are just some fantastic, fantastic books from the writing community, I am in awe of independent authors. I will put an independent author up against a big time contracted publishing big six type person any day. These are folks that have scrapped, that have fought, that have learned the hard way. They're trying to hold down a full-time job, and they're trying to write on the side, and they've got kids and obligations. It's incredibly, incredibly difficult. And I'm in awe. I've read some in the last just 2 years of people that I've met on Twitter. I've read some fantastic works that make mine look like a kindergartner's type of work. I'm in awe. I sit awake at night and I think, oh my gosh, if I could have write like them, I would just be a zillionaire or something, or have a whole bunch of fans or something. I have met some incredibly talented folks, and I really, really, really am fortunate to know folks and read their works, and it's inspired me to do a better job. And so getting sort of what has been touched on already, I think David and Harriet have both said this, you come into your second book, you've got all this knowledge now, and you're like, oh my gosh, my first one, it seemed so easy. It was hard. It was a lot of work, but it seemed easy. Now you know all these things, and you're like, it's so much harder because you're trying to do better than you did the first time. You know that the knowledge is there. You've got the knowledge now, and you're like, oh, I can't make these mistakes again. Or, hey, there's a better way to do this. Or, hey, I want to write even better than I did before. So it's taking longer. For me personally, I'm not writing a series. I'm going into a different genre. I don't write in a specific genre. My first one was Russian historical fiction. My second one is probably classified as literary fiction, or perhaps maybe a thriller type situation where it's modern times versus in the past. I'm not doing a series. I'd love to do one, but I often say that the story chooses me. I don't choose the story. So I didn't really have a choice in that. But having learned everything the last 18 months since publication, I really think it's harder because I want to apply all of the things that I've learned to make the product even much better than it was 18 months ago. That's not to say that was a bad product 18 months ago. It's just that now that I have all this knowledge learned sometimes the hard way, I have set the bar even higher than I want to. There's a trite saying. I used to be a manager in my former career. A type A of folks, not type A like type A and B personality as far as being aggressive or laid back, but A type players or writers will want to interact and hire A type people. B level managers hire C levels because they don't want to be outdone. But as someone that is, I think, wanting to do a good job, I only want to surround myself with folks that are greater than myself, because I will then in turn learn more than I know now. So I would never want to go to a writer's conference where I knew everything. I want the opposite. I want to know nothing. I'm totally ignorant, or I want to be super smart, but surround myself with folks that know even more than I do, because that's how I'm going to grow as an author. And I think I do that every day. I'm reading works that are independently published, these indie authors, and I'm totally blown away. I'm like, how folks have managed to do this and do it in such a way where they're not full-time writers for the most part. They have full-time careers. They have kids and obligations. I'm just floored. I mean, the writing is better than anything I've experienced in the like I said, the traditional published world. So knowing all of these things, and for this topic, that the second book or the second work in your series is harder, because I want to make it even better than it was the first time. And that's why it's taking a long time for me. Maybe your experience is different, but I don't want to hog all the time here. But for me, it's hard because I have set the bar higher for myself than it was when I hit publish on that first novel. So
yeah, and you care.
I care absolutely. These works.
But so, yeah, caring makes it really hard. Especially, I write horror. When I care about my characters, it's really hard, because I'm going, sorry, you picked the wrong genre to be in.
It's hard. I just one last thing. Everybody on this call, whether you realize it or not, your work is going to be in the universe forever. All of us will pass on at some point in the future. Your work is now enshrined in human history. Someone in the future that you don't even know, that probably hasn't even been born, will be reading your work in the future. You'll be long gone, but your work and your ideas and your story will remain. For me personally, I think that's tremendously rewarding. I will have made a mark on humanity. My words, my ideas, my thoughts will transcend my lifetime. And I think what better reason to be an author than to pass on everything that you're writing down to some future generation. I think that's tremendously rewarding for me. And now I'll be quiet.
Well, and the big thing on that, just, I don't know if you've done this or not, but an idea for anybody becoming an independent author or becoming an author in general is making sure to get the copyright for whatever country you live in. That was something that I did not do that. And then I think it was a mutual, somebody who was on one of the last podcasts with us, John, had mentioned the fact that their work was stolen and they had to prove to Amazon that they were the author. So
that's not a good, I know someone that happened to personally, and that's not a great situation to be in. Thankfully, it was resolved amicably, but yeah, that's not a good situation. Yeah, get your stuff copyrighted or do whatever you have to do. That's a horrible place to be in.
Exactly. So good. And I think, like I said, we care. But the other tidbit of information you gave away there, which I don't know that you did or not, did it on purpose or not, was the fact that you're reading other authors, other independent authors, and just other authors in general. And
that's all I read now. That I only read independent authors. Somebody might give me a book for Christmas that's a mainstream type book, but I only like to read independent authors because that's who I feel I can learn from at this moment.
Yeah, me as well. With that said, who would like to take the topic next? Who should we pass the baton to? Okay, everybody's not stepping up at once. Oh, there we go. Let's go for Aaron's. I wrote 15 novels before I got a blockage. No, I'm just kidding on that. So the question I've got on that for you, as part of the original question, is: have you hit that hard novel where it was like the one that caught you? And I know it wasn't your second, and I'm in the same boat. Like I said, the first three was I'm like, yeah, this is great. I mean, 5,000 words a night. I'm doing great. Then it was, oh wait, I've wrote 3 words in the last 2 weeks. So for you, what do you find?
I have definitely hit some walls. And I actually, as you guys were talking, I realized maybe the reason why I was able to write my first few without that block was I wrote the first 3 books of my 4-book series without publishing the first one. So I had already finished 3 and started the 4th before the first one came out. So I didn't really have that experience of, because the first drafts were already there. So it was just a matter of going back and revising and editing.
Now, not to interrupt, but to interrupt because I'm the host, so I can do that. Before you continue, are you self-published? I didn't take a
yes,
for people. So you're okay, excellent. That's yeah. And I tell people self-published authors try harder. So sorry, I just wanted to make sure we clarified if anybody's traditionally published, we don't hold it against you for finding that golden light or whatever it is. But so you are self-published. Wow. So please keep going. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's okay. All my novels, and then I do short stories, are published in anthologies and online, and that's different. But usually small press. But yeah, now I forgot what I was saying. So yeah, as far as right now, I have, I want to say 5 whips, 5 works in progress, maybe 6 if I'm going back, that are just, and I'm still writing. I'm writing every day. And I tell myself that's what matters. But, like last week I was all in on this new whip, just writing, got great word counts. And then I opened it up this week and I'm like, meh. And I went back to an old one and I'm like, I'm feeling this again. So, I mean, I guess in a way it's kind of been a bit of a block. Like I know it'll take me a while to put something new out. Although I just put something out in August. I'm not feeling that pressure. But at the same time, I'm also writing. I'm consistently writing. I'm happy with the way they're going. And I'm just letting myself enjoy that and say, hey, if this is working, go with it. Even though it seems a little crazy to have that many.
Now, in your work in progresses, I'm always curious because I do the same thing. Is I'll have 3 or 4 works in progress. I'll get so far and I'm like, this is great. And then I'm like, oh, I'm done with this one. My thing is if I think of the ending, so I'm not a planner, and I'd like to know who is when we go through that. I'm not someone who says, here's what's going to happen. Here's the flow of my book. It's I'm writing and I'm going, oh, wow, I didn't know that was going to happen. That's cool. And so I'll have something I'm going, and then I all of a sudden think of the ending and I'm like, okay, I'm bored. I don't want to write this anymore. So that's how I get sidetracked. But I've also found that some of my works in progress, I'll pick those up and put those into other books because I'm like going, wait a second, I had this character in this work in progress. That would be great in this other story. And I just recently did that, and that allowed me to finish that other story. But have you done that with any of your works in progress or characters like this you've created?
I haven't, and mostly because one of the things that keeps me writing is that those works in progress are usually in different genres or different viewpoints. Like they wouldn't really overlap very well. And because that just makes me more excited about it. It's like when I get tired of writing, some sort of Regency style Bluebeard story, I can go and just write something contemporary and I can speak like I do every day. And it's refreshing. And I just like that.
I like that. It's amazing. Okay. Who else would like to take the topic next? Harriet, would you like to go next?
Sure, thank you. Before, during my introduction, I sort of explained why I thought it was more difficult to do the second one because I wanted to improve. But I think it was very interesting what you and Aaron have said about having multiple works in progress. I thought to myself, oh my God, how can you do that? I admire that. I would find that difficult because I seem to focus so intently on what I'm working on right now. Now I have to start at the 3rd, but it is turning out to be one of those crummy first drafts, which I find easily excusable because everybody says it's okay, and I feel like I'll go back and do it. I will tell you one thing that I am writing a series, and that was not my intention at first. When I wrote my first book, Fee Simple Conditional, I did not envision it as a series. It was just to sort of recapture a world, and not like a fantasy world, but a little slice of life that I had experienced that I believed was going away, and I wanted to preserve it. And again, I allude to John's lovely discourse about leaving a legacy. That's how you feel that if once you've written something, you have immortalized it. You've immortalized your characters. They will live forever. So that's basically what I wanted to do with that first book, was to create um, I guess, to memorialize a world that I thought was going away. But when I finished it, I realized I couldn't abandon my characters. They grew on me and I cared about them. And I thought I have to keep their story going. So that was really what propelled me to do the second book in that series. And I, theoretically planned for 5. We'll see what happens. I know that that's aspirational, but I hope it happens. One thing that I did do that was very different from the first one is written in first person. And towards the very, very end of the book, I started to think about, well, how would this have been perceived by another character? And I added something to the end of that book that I called a coda rather than an epilogue, where I wrote it's brief, but in third person for the character for whom I had written in first person, plus the character whose character I wanted to explore. And that really opened me up to a whole new way of thinking about my story. So when I started the second one, I started writing it entirely in third person omniscient with both of these main characters. But I found ultimately that the character who had been a first person character in the first book, I had to go back to first person because I felt that writing it in third person, I lost her voice.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Because I had seen it pardon? I'm sorry.
I said that makes sense. I could see that happening as far as for, them losing their voice, right?
I really felt there was a deficit there. There was something missing. So I went back and I sort of rewrote that whole portion in first person. However, I had seen this before and I felt that, where I had read it before was successful. I would hope that I was able to do it successfully, but what I did was create chapters with my second main character written in third person omniscient, because I didn't want to confuse that with the first person status of my other main character. So that was a challenge to try to write in the 2 sort of different voices. And I hope it works. I have had it read by other people who, confirmed my my hope in that. So I hope it really does. But that's another thing that made it harder to write that second one, because I really wanted to be able to preserve the individuality of those characters, even though I was writing them in different voices. So we'll see what happens. One of my beta readers said to me, she said, well, how about going forward? Are your other characters going to have their own voices? And I'm thinking to myself, oh my gosh, what did I start? I'm going to have all these different people talking to me. But we'll see how that goes. But that's been my experience. And however, I was encouraged to start a freestanding novel by someone I really respect. So somewhere in the back of my mind, I do have a little bit started on that. And I want to do a little more research, but I admire Erin. I admire you incredibly for writing every day, because I find that when I'm editing and formatting and doing all that crazy stuff, I can barely write. I mean, I guess I'm in the process of editing. You're writing. I mean, you're rewriting. But I think being able to absolutely sort of switch your process, I find that very admirable. I've never tried it, and I don't know, I guess I'll have to.
And then next, Mr. Chris Brown. So you've written one, right? And independently published. And so now you've got the itch to write something else. Are you considering, as part of your answer, are you considering writing something else that's, true as far as for nonfiction, or would you move more into fiction, you think?
And I think that's where the biggest obstacle for myself comes into, because my first book was about me, right? I can tell my story because my story is easy to tell because I lived it and I was there, and I have people and I have journals and I have all that to fall back on. When I ended my first book, I ended it on the assumption that I don't know what the future holds for me, and really I don't. So how do I write a follow-up story to a story that I don't know how it's going to go? Because literally I ended the story like in July. We started the process of editing and getting people to look over it. And then once it was published, I went, okay, what do I do now? Like there's nothing after you published, right? You start doing okay, people, can you buy my book? That'd be greatly appreciated.
You make lots of money once you hit publish, right?
Well, exactly. Like John says, you really hope your parents will buy it. You really hope your brother and sister will buy it. But at the end of the day, if they don't, trust me, I had to buy their own books for them. Yep. Not sure how that worked out, but I lost money on this. So when when I published, and then in earlier October, I said, okay, I as a former journalist, I enjoy writing, right? I used to do it on a daily basis, and I really enjoyed writing it. So I opened up the book, and I opened up like I said at the beginning, a Microsoft Word document, and I said, okay, what's this one going to be about? Is it going to be a continuation about me? Is it going to be something completely different? I remember all my little stories that I used to start when I was in university and college, when I was going through journalism school, but there was nothing ever that I said to myself, I can see this published. So I'm not sure about you, but when you stare at a white piece of paper for 4 days in a row, thinking what's coming next, and what story do I write, and how do I write a different story that's me but not me? Because when you hear people tell, oh, I could hear your voice in the story, I could tell that you were writing it, you get sort of an ego, and you go, oh, that's great. Oh crap, though. Now the next story, like John says, you have to go, am I still going to have that voice that people came to sort of read in that first book? So I don't know. And that's why it's so inspiring to hear 3 different people who I've never met. Well, 4, including David, but I always forget to mention the host, but 3 different people who all have different backstories, and all are doing it in their own unique way. And I'm going, okay, what can I learn from all 3 of you? And I've learned so much, even in the first few minutes that we've spent here, because I'm thinking, okay, what if I just start writing? What's the worst that can happen? You write 10 pages, you throw it out. Okay. Yeah. At the end of 100 pages, then I read it over and I go, oh, well, this was crap. Maybe I shouldn't publish this. Or maybe there is something in there that I just need to edit and re-edit and re-edit it. But it's just, what type of book, what type of story, what is the author, Christopher W. Brown? So I just don't know that yet. And because my first book was me, what's the next? But I have the itch. I can tell you the itch is there. When I was writing this thing, like the words flew. The words just came like spilling out. And I'm not sure if you ever get that moment when you start writing and you just continue to write. That's what it was for me in that first book. And I enjoyed so much of it. So I want to get back to it. The idea is always the hardest part, right?
Yeah. For me on that first book, it was more, I was wanting, I do a full-time job. So at the end of the day, I was wanting to get so I could write, so I could find out what the characters were going to do next, right? What was going to happen and where they're going. So yes, I think the fact is, when it comes to their second books and it comes to other books later on down the road, one of the biggest things is we care and we've learned from our mistakes. One of the things that Harriet, you had mentioned was the fact of switching from first to third person and then back to first. I did the same thing on, my first series is all in third person, God mode, if you will. And I just loved that when I was writing that. And because I barely passed English, and I think I did fail it like twice, maybe in high school. But regardless of that, it was one of the things where English is not my strong suit. So thank goodness I have an editor who happens to be my cousin, and she does a great job. So, but anyway, regardless, so going from third person, I decided that I was going to be a grown-up writer, and then I was going to write a book in first person. So my zombie story is told from first person, my voice, and all of that good stuff. And I'm like, oh, this is great and fun. But then I started working on a serial killer novel, and so I'm jumping genres a little bit into police type stuff in the next one with the serial killer, and having that be from my voice, I'm like, I don't know that I want people to associate that with me. So I'm in the process of switching that actually to making her a female serial killer, because I love the lady that did my last audiobook. And I'm hoping that she'll want to do this one as well, because I think it would be great from her voice. But the question I'd like to ask, and then I'd like to open it up for anybody to ask any questions about anything. as far as going from genres and jumping genres, that I think you've done more than any of us, Aaron. How hard is that to switch gears from something where you don't have cell phones to you do have cell phones, which introduce a whole new thing. And I'm not just talking about cell phones, but just technology. How difficult is it for you to jump genres, or is it more refreshing so it's not difficult?
I'm more refreshed. For me, yes, especially when I go back to more historical, it slows me down a little bit, because then I got to look up, okay, what was there at this time? What were they using? And stuff like that. So I find it more refreshing to go forward to contemporary, where I don't have to think about it as much. And it's definitely more challenging to write in more of the past tense. My last release was about a 1950s librarian who takes a 7-year nap, because it's like a Rip Van Winkle retelling.
Nice.
And so she ends up in modern day, but at the beginning and also throughout, I have to think, okay, what is this song published before when she was still there? Would she have said this? What kind of slang would she understand this word? And so like that constant having to think about those things, it's fun, but it definitely slows you down, because it's a lot of Googling.
Thank goodness for Google. So for the lesson for all the writers out there, Google is your friend. When was this published? When did this come out, and all of that good fun stuff. Anybody else want to take that topic? If not, anybody else have any questions for the team? Ooh.
I've never written in I guess I've written children's book, but in another genre. I find it scary, because it would entail so much more research and just a different mindset for me, but it's a challenge. So maybe I'll consider it. I just want to comment on something Chris said, because Chris said, he wrote basically a memoir, a book where he was the main character. And, obviously it was his voice. When I wrote this first person book, it had a lot of experiences that I shared with other people, but it was fictionalized. And when a friend of mine read it, she was talking to me about it, and she said, well, in the book, when you did X, and I said, no, it wasn't me. It was my character. And I thought it was kind of funny, because I thought, no, this did not happen to me. It was fiction. But I think sometimes when you do, I guess that's the hazard of writing in first person. It's not you, unless you are writing a memoir, and it really is you. But that was a funny thing that happened to me.
That's very interesting.
I'd like to weigh in on the different genres, because it just occurred to me, I did historical fiction for my first one. And obviously, if you're doing historical fiction, unless you're doing historical fantasy, which is another genre, which is just as legitimate, you want to be within the realm of exactly what was happening at the time, what could have happened at the time, and what did happen at the time. If you're, say, for instance, you're writing a World War II novel, unless it's alternative history, which is a whole nother great genre, the Allies win World War II. Now, if you want to make it that the Axis, the Germans and the Japanese won World War II, go for it. That's alternative history. Plenty of people do that. That's a fun thought experiment. But if you're doing historical fiction, you probably want to do your research so that you can sound authentic. And I did tons of research, because I'm not Russian. I didn't live in the 1930s. I've never been to Russia. And if you're writing Russian historical fiction, there's a lot of things you have to get right to sound at least somewhat authentic. So I put that work in, and I hope that the book gives that flavor. I guess what I'm trying to say is that if you are writing historical fiction, there's a lot of things that you have to research. But if you're writing any other genre, I think, maybe this is naive, but I think the author's imagination can come into play. Yes, if you want to do something in the 1950s, you're not going to be talking about people having cell phones, unless it's some kind of alternate science fiction type thing where the cell phone was invented in the 1940s. And that's perfectly legitimate. So you wouldn't want to have something this anachronistic or out of place. But I think it's also fine if you tell a story that isn't precisely the way that things happened. Not necessarily alternative history, but you could have things that the author imagines happened, and I think that's fine too. Even if you're looking at the past, or even if you're looking at the present, I think the author's imagination can play a big part of the story, and you don't necessarily have to confine yourself to the rules of what happened in the past or what is plausible if you're telling a story. I don't know if that makes sense. It does on the historical fiction side, but I think it's wide open on every other genre. I mean, tell an interesting story, tell a story where the United States has two presidents, they're co-presidents or something. That's not alternative history. That's just a different way that the country is run. I'm reading a story right now where there's a fictionalized, it's in the modern times, but there's a fictional country in South America. There's no Parador in South America, but that's what the author imagines that this country and these people are working in it. And that works totally fine within the bounds of the story they're trying to tell. There are other countries they mentioned that, Canada, United States, those all exist, but their country is fictionalized.
Yes.
And it takes place in the modern times. It doesn't mean that you have to pick some country. Oh, I wanted to pick Brazil. Okay, well, then you're telling an alternate history of what happened, what's happening now. Just their own country. I think that's perfectly legitimate. And as an author, someone with imagination, I think that's a cool thing to do, because you're inventing something that still tells a really cool story, but it doesn't fit within the bounds of what is reality today. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. And for me, the biggest thing is, if you're going to have details, and you're a new author, you're going to have details, verify those details, whether it be when a country was formed, whether it be, hey, the fact that this person has 6 shots in a revolver and he's just shot 7 bad guys with that same revolver without reloading, right? The old Westerns and stuff like that, where it was unlimited ammo, right? We don't want to do things like that. You want to, if you have details, you want to keep them and follow through with them. It's something of, for me and one of mine, I had people putting, generators and other equipment in the trunk of a car. And I'm like, well, it's not all going to fit in the trunk of that type of car. So I switched it to a truck because it would all fit in there. And I had to go through and rewrite a bunch of stuff from the beginning, but it made more sense. So don't bury yourself in details, but feel free to have, poetic license or whatever.
Sure.
And comics do that all the time. Metropolis, in case you didn't know, is not a real city.
Or Gotham City. I mean, they do have this.
Gotham City,
what I was going to say is showrunners, people that form TV shows or series on cable and things, they'll have what is called a Bible. They invent there's a series that comes out, and they'll have a Bible, what they call the Bible for the show, which has all the rules, all the characters, the backstories, everything, so that they can stay consistent over episode, so they don't violate their own rules within whatever story they're trying to tell. And some of these Bibles are huge. They're even longer than the text of the episodes. But that's so that they can, other writers, especially on shows that won't be one writer, they'll want to refer to this and make sure that they stay consistent across episodes.
And I have bought some of those after the shows were done,
Yeah.
when they come out with them, which are very, very interesting.
Sure, absolutely.
So on the same topic, before we jump to any questions that anybody has for anybody else, and also, or if you have ideas for new writers, this is what this show's about. So one of the things I'd like to know for those of us who do get stuck, and or are stuck, what helps you get out of being stuck, right? Is it reading others' books? Is it, Chris is out on this one. He's like, I'm tapped out. But maybe being on a show like this helps you be unstuck, Chris, because I think with your journalism, you should write a journalistic, like where there's a journalist trying to solve something, whether it be the supernatural stuff, whether it be the crime drama or whatever. I mean, that would be a perfect fun genre to do, and base it in Canada, where there's not a lot of those types of things with Canadian politics that nobody here knows, right? Or nobody in the U.S. knows. Sorry, I was being very U.S. centric.
So, and I apologize. I'm going to jump in here on this question because I want to try and get this statement out. So, I'm not sure how everyone puts pen to paper in this group, right? Like, because everyone has their own unique way. Because some people, like, the characters come to their mind and they can just write and just write and write. Maybe John, it's researching and then being able to write afterwards. But for me, like I said, the very first story was about me, so I was able to write it coherently. So, and yes, I would love to write a young adult story like Aaron does. I'd love to write something else, but it, I have a hard time, and I think that's where my biggest stumbling block is here, is because it didn't happen to me, because I can't put myself in that character's position. Or, okay, do I have to have a big giant cork board in my room and sort of look at it like Always Sunny in Philadelphia, where there's strings attached to web clouds to try and figure out how this story is going to work? And I think that's where my biggest stumbling block is, because you guys have all written stories, and I'm not sure how that first step of writing the story worked for you. And maybe David did a chat on that a little bit earlier. But for me, it's, how do I put myself in that character's position, or how do I put myself in the story so that way that flow that I had in the very first book was able to maybe go and be in that second book, and maybe it be a different genre, but it's just, okay, I would love to write a story about supernatural journalist talking about Canadian politics in Canada, but I guarantee you that that readership is going to be very small. Maybe my mom and my dad again. But for you, and I'm going to pose it as a question, more of a follow-up, hopefully for someone else, but what's the process, right? Because you've all started writing second books. I'm sitting staring at that. You've written and published two or more books already. That second book, was it just a continuation? Was there a corkboard? Was there a already laid out Bible, as David said, that you had and you already had it planned out? For first time authors who are thinking about that very first moment of, oh crap, and maybe I'm still early on in this. Maybe it's only because it's been a month since I published that I'm still sitting here. As Erin said, she published her second one after 3 months, or she wrote her second one in 3 months after finishing her first one. So pressure here, Erin. So what is the process? What is the second step? Because once the second one's published, there's not much, like I said, you can do. So what is the second step? Is it, okay, just continue sitting down and writing, or is it taking a 2-month break, a 2-week break, and just recouping yourself? Erin, go. Sorry, David. My podcast host moment is coming out right now. I do apologize.
This is a roundtable. I like your question better. So please, Erin.
I'm going to not refer to my second book because that was different. That was in a series. So that was more like I already knew where I was going. But for news stories in general, I find for me, if I even have like the tiniest idea, maybe I have a title or a genre, I work really, really well when I build a playlist or get even just a couple songs that kind of resonate with the feel of what I want. I don't know what it's going to be about yet, but this song kind of gives me vibes. And then I put it on my headphones and I'll go for a walk, or I'll sit with my notebook and I'll loop it like a crazy person and just like, and I'll just, and then especially if I'm out walking, I find walking really helps. And they say that actually does make you more creative when you're walking out and outside. And I'll get these ideas and I save them and I come home and I put them in my little notebook, and I just think about them and I just keep listening, or maybe I do something else and I just think about them and then I jot stuff down. Sometimes I do little word webs in my thing. I'll say, okay, here's things I want to happen. Okay, I want to write a dance scene. Okay, sure, why not? Or this, I want this to happen. I don't know how the story is going to go, but these are some ideas that are just kind of, I want them in there maybe if they fit. And then once I get enough of that, then I will sit down and I'll start pantsing it and I'll just start writing. But I won't just sit down without any idea of what I'm going to do and look at my Word document, because I don't know. I can't even get that first sentence out. So also, if you're getting stuck, I really, really recommend short stories, because they'll give you like a topic. Like a lot of times people who are looking for short stories, or give your own topic, and you got it. Okay, I got this topic. right? But I got to come up with a story, and just the challenge of that, and then writing just something. First of all, you feel very satisfied because you finish something, right? Like, okay, I got to write a 1,500 word short story, and I finished it. I finished a story this week. Huzzah! Good for me. Break out the champagne, right? Like that accomplishment of doing it. But it's just such a great challenge, and I don't know. I'm done talking now. That was me.
I'd like to jump in just on to dovetail what Erin is saying about getting kickstarted. There's a great organization. I've been doing it for 3 or 4 years. It's called NYC Midnight. You can just Google that. They have contests for microfiction throughout the year. They have a short story contest, which is their flagship, which is 2,500 words. There's one coming up in November that I'm registered for, which is the very first one I did, which is the microfiction 250. It's 250 words. They have everything in between. They have a flash fiction, which is 1,000 words, and they give you either a day or 2 days. It's a very short time frame. They assign you a random genre and a random keyword and a random action. You don't know what you're going to, you could get romantic comedy, you could get historical fiction, you could get mystery, you could get horror. They're going to give you a situation. They're going to give you a keyword that has to appear in the story. And in some cases, you've got 24 hours. Bam, the clock is ticking. And in these cases, you've got 4,000 or 5,000 other people that are in these different groups that all get judged, and you get feedback on every story from the judges. And then they have multiple rounds. And at the end of the rounds is where they have cash prizes. So it does cost money to enter these, but they're like $20. But the randomness is really what does it for me. 2 or 3 in a row, I got romance. I'm not a romance reader. I'm not a romance writer. But when the clock is ticking, you're going to suddenly find yourself in a genre that you're not comfortable with. And guess what? When the pressure's on, you can actually adapt and do a really good job. And they have a whole online forum where in between the judging, other contestants will read and give you feedback along with the judges at the end. And I have found this organization has been tremendous with getting you writing on a consistent basis, because they have 6 or 7 contests throughout the year, and there are different levels and different abilities. But this organization, more than anything else, really gets me excited for writing on a recurring basis where things are going to be judged and you're going to get feedback. And I would encourage you to look it up. Like just Google NYC, like New York City, Midnight, and they have 5 or 6 different types of formats, different lengths, different time periods, but a tremendous organization. And the randomness is what gets me. Oh, you like writing science fiction? Well, guess what? When you have to write romantic comedy, you're going to stretch your abilities to their maximum, because it isn't going to be something that you're used to. The very first time I did this 4 or 5 years ago, I got science fiction. I'm like, great. I love science fiction. I read it and I write it. And I thought I did a good job. I didn't make it to the second round. But the first time I did make it past into the second round was in one of these romance categories. I'm like, I didn't know I could write this. I mean, this is not something I would normally read and or write, but it concentrates the mind. The deadlines are very short. And I highly recommend it if you want to get something that's kickstarted and you're going to have a lot of fun doing it. And they also support charities. A certain percentage of the entry fee goes to a charity of your choice, which you can pick in the registration. So that's also another good thing.
Yeah, it's definitely fun. I did one. I think I got fantasy, and I had have a unicorn or something like that, and I don't remember. So I didn't.
Well, those are crazy things. I mean, it's not just fantasy and you get a unicorn. You'll have an umbrella and you're in a booth. I mean, it's crazy things. You got to write the story. I mean, as crazy as that sounds, you can come up with some stuff if you're under the gun. At least I can. I seem to write better under pressure than with no deadline.
Well, I've even seen things where it's writing prompts, like daily writing prompts and stuff like that. I've never done any of those. For me, the way I write is I hate to say it, I go to a blank page and the words just come out, and then sometimes they don't come out, right? I don't know what I'm going to write until I start writing it. In fact, the serial killer one I'm working on right now, I didn't know it was going to be serial killer until I started writing, and I'm going, this isn't horror. what is this? So no, that those are definitely NYU, right? Is what that is. Yeah.
NYC, like New York.
NYC.
Just remember New York City and then midnight, and if you just put NYC midnight with short story or competition or challenge, you'll get right there. If not, just send me an email or tag me, and I'll point you in the right direction.
And something that was fun for me also to do was I wrote a book with somebody else. And so that was interesting. I want to get in where I'm writing one with, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 other people. So just in case anybody said no, but I think it was fun because I wasn't responsible for everything in the story. It was difficult because I couldn't make all of the decisions in the story. And so it had some things that the person's like, do you really want to say this? Can we say this? And, so that I found that interesting. Has anybody else teamed up with anyone to write books or anything yet?
I have not. I know a couple people, and personally for me, I would love to do this. And I've reached out to a couple people that I admire in the Twitter writing community, and they always say that if they do that I'll be their first choice to do it. But I'm not aware of anyone personally that's done that. But I think I would love to do that in my writing career, because I think that would be a really terrific thing to collaborate with someone and write something together.
Excellent. That's perfect.
I know one of our book club people we've read, LB Black, she's done a co-write, and I thought was really cool about her, she said that the two of them actually they made it dual point of view, and they had like a point of view that they wrote. So I thought that was a really fun.
Oh, that's a cool idea. That's excellent. Yeah. Okay.
Great idea. I like that.
That's an awesome idea. The children's book that I wrote it with someone who was an illustrator, but she also did some editing. And it was a good experience. I think you have to be all right with forfeiting some of your independence. And sometimes that's harder than others, particularly if you feel strongly about something. I'm a pretty acquiescent person, but I think if I had been more sort of aggressive, it might have been more difficult. But I like the idea of the conflicting viewpoints. I think that could be very cool.
That's fair.
I just want to reiterate what John said about NYC Midnight. I did do it once myself. It's challenging. I think mine was like a horror story with an novel, so you can only imagine.
Yeah,
but, it was
time constraints are very tiny. I mean, a day or two. I mean, I think on the 2,500 word, which is their flagship, you get like a week for the first round. But with each round, for every contest, the timelines shrink, and so you're really under the gun.
One thing I was going to say to Chris about like continuing on, like how do you do it? And kind of like Aaron, except I don't use music, I go on walks, but I write a lot in my head and then hope I remember it. But I also create a lot of backstory. Like when I make a character, there may be something that a reader will never read about this person, but to me, it helps form their character and their personality and their experiences. And I have lots of backstories in my head. And I think that sort of propels the regular story too, because if you understand how somebody thinks and how they've lived and how they were raised, sometimes that, allows you to create scenes with them and the trajectory of a story. So if you think about, a topic or a person, go beyond what you're going, you might want to go beyond what you're going to write about them, because that'll help you understand them better and maybe their motivation and their talents and their foibles.
No, that's a great idea. I mean, thinking I don't do that as much. I'll write, a brief thing about the characters. And then as I'm writing the stories, I have like a character sheet, like the old D&D days, and I'll write, little things about them so I don't forget things. But I do like the idea of the backstory. I might start trying to do that more as characters are introduced to me by the voices that come out through come out of my head. I might try to start writing some of those backstories. I think that's a great idea for people.
Sorry, I want to ask one last question, and I know this is David's show, and I have four people who have written books before, and as someone who is trying to actually write their first actual novel that's not a memoir, I want to try and pick your brains here, and hopefully someone who's listened to this might be able to get. Um, I'm not sure in the USA, but in Canada, we're seeing this rise of sort of political correctness within writing. You can't write as openly and as freely as you might have been able to do way back, say, 4 years ago, or even 5 years ago, or even 10 years ago. How much pressure do you put on yourself to try and make things sort of a-okay, that someone's not going to take offense to your writing? Because I think that's my biggest challenge, because I try to not ruffle feathers in my life. I try not to cause much, like someone to say, well, you wrote this wrong, and this story about Russia, let's just take John's story here, Russia didn't happen, or it did, but it only happened this way, and you got it wrong by this one minute detail, so I can't trust you anymore, and you're canceled. So how much pressure do you put on yourself to sort of not deal with the sort of the political correctness and the correctness of today's society, and just write just to enjoy writing? Does that make sense? I know that's a weird question to ask. It's just, I think that's my biggest stumbling block as well, is I'm looking at the screen and say, okay, how do I write something? Because my story is my story. No one can take offense to my story because, well, it happened to me. Like, if I write a fiction story, am I going to upset someone because I took a small detail from something I overheard or saw in a movie, and I said, this is a great character, or this is a great plot line that I can try to expand and make my own? How much pressure does that sort of weigh on your writing styles?
Well, John, he called you out, so why don't you take that answer first?
I would like to. I think for me personally, I try to be as authentic as I can be. Of course, I'm not going out to offend anyone. And I think regardless of that, I firmly believe as an author, if you want to write something, write it. It doesn't matter if anyone else reads it. If no one else reads it, of course, no one else can be offended. But even if someone else is offended by what you're writing, if you want to write for yourself, I think that's totally fine. And you shouldn't necessarily be going out of your way to tailor your writing excessively to please someone else, especially if it's a difficult subject. At the same time, you do want to be authentic. And so if you're trying to write from within a culture that isn't your own, then you need to do your research. And if you can say at the end of the day as an author, I didn't live in that culture, but I'm doing the best that I can to represent that culture, then you still might at the end of the day make some mistakes, but they may be out of ignorance, or they may just be totally innocuous. If you did the best that you could as an author to represent that culture, for me personally, I don't have a problem with that. Now, if someone was writing something and representing my culture, and they were doing it in a way that was meant to be hurtful, well, that goes both ways. Of course, you're going to feel hurtful and resentful, and you're not going to like that. But if someone can genuinely say, I did the very best that I could, because you're writing in a culture that existed 500 years ago, no one is around that you can pick their brain and say, hey, listen, what was this like? Or tell me your stories and I will represent you. You're going to have to go and rely on historical documents or historical accounts of what that was like. And the further the way that is from your current time today, the harder that's going to be. At some point, you're going to have to put yourself in the mind of who you're trying to represent. And you're going to do the best job that you can. As long as you're not doing it maliciously and you're trying to genuinely do the best job that you can, you still might make mistakes. And you can fix that very easily. Being independent published, you can revise your work completely and update that. If you're trying to do it maliciously, well, then that's another argument. You're trying to do something with an agenda, and you're trying to hurt something. You're trying to be malicious. There's no excuse for that. But I think for me personally, because I didn't live in the 1930s, and I'm not Russian, and I'm not Jewish, and I didn't grow up in that culture, I did an excessive amount of research, and I tried the very best that I could to represent that in a way that would not be offensive and that would be as authentic as I could. And I've gotten some feedback, and it's been very positive. If somebody comes to me tomorrow and said, listen, you totally blew this, I'll say, thank you for that information. I would like to pick your brain, and I would do the best that I could to revise that. But at some point, you just have to go as an author and say, listen, I'm doing the best that I can. And these are my words, and this is my story. And I'm not trying to be offensive here. I'm trying to do the best job that I can. If I was limited, and this is the other part of your story, a question, I think, Chris, if I was only limited to writing stories from my own culture and my own time period and my own experiences, for me personally, I think that would be very boring, and no one wants to read that. I have to, as an author, extend myself and go into other cultures and other time periods and other places that I've never been to, because I'm only one person. I've lived a lifetime of 50 years, but that can only go so far. An author's imagination can be infinite. And I think as long as you're trying to do that in a respectful way, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And there's a big debate right now about, what do they call it? They call it cultural appropriation. I don't want to weigh in on that on this call. I think that we could probably take an hour or two just to talk about that subject completely on its own. But I will say, for me personally, I've tried to be very respectful and do my homework and do my research in such a way that no one's going to come and say, this is completely not the way that it happened. You got it completely wrong. So far, I've not heard that. If somebody comes out and says that, I'd love to talk to them because I like the subject for my own novel. But so far, my feedback has been very positive. And I think that's just about the best that you can hope for as an author.
That's awesome. Aaron, Harriet, would y'all like to take that one as well?
I'll say something. I think, there's a fine line because you want to walk the line of being sensitive without stifling your creativity. And I'll just give you an example from my book. The one that's going to come out soon. I write these books that involve like legal issues. And the main character in this book becomes a public defender who represents individuals who are committed to psychiatric institutions and hospitals. And it's something that I have experience in. So I wanted to make it as authentic as possible, but I also wanted to be sensitive to the fact that, there are people who have been on the other side of this and have experienced it from a different perspective. And I wanted to be sensitive to their feelings also and be as clear and as truthful from my viewpoint as possible. So I put a lot of effort in trying to be sensitive. Now, somebody might read some of my passages and say, well, she wasn't very nice describing the actions of this particular person. It might have been something I actually witnessed. It might have been something I embellished. It might have been something I totally made up. But I did try to walk that line between sensitivity and my own sort of creative independence. So we'll see how it turns out. We'll see if I get panned or screamed at, or we'll see, or committed. We'll see.
That's awesome. How about you, Aaron? How do you toe that line, or do you not toe that line?
Well, I would say that I did write, like I said, I wrote a thriller, and it's about a survivor, a young woman who's a survivor who develops a split personality as kind of a protection against, at night she couldn't sleep, whenever, and she develops this second personality who kind of protects her, and then eventually kind of turns into more of a vigilante justice kind of character. And I had to be really careful. I had to, whenever you're dealing with mental health, I think that's a really big one. You have to be very careful how you're representing it, so people don't, want to encourage the wrong stereotypes. And I used sensitivity readers when I was done, just like, okay. And then any little thing, any little trigger. Also, I don't get into like graphic stuff in it, but her past trauma, am I being sensitive about that? And I did have people who had shared experiences who said, okay, I was a little worried. And then I read it and it was actually very therapeutic. But like, I feel like with those, you have to be so careful. And I will still get people who haven't read it. They'll just look at the title and kind of hear what it's about. And they'll be like, oh no, you can't do that. You can't use, split personalities as a plot device and, and violence. And I'm like, listen, read the book. And then if you have a problem with it, I would love to hear. But I did everything I could beforehand to make sure that it was being represented in a safe and appropriate way. And I think it is. And I haven't had any problems from readers who've read it. Only people who are like, I haven't read it, but I've got opinions. But yes, you do have to be careful about that. I think that's definitely an issue.
Yeah, they're truly judging a book by its cover, is what you're saying.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Like, I heard the title and a little bit of what it's about, so I assume it's horrible. You're like,
I can agree. I can relate to that. The word lockdown on my book has had so many people just up in arms in Canada because some people say we didn't go to a lockdown, but I'm like, no, if you read the book, lockdown as in the cancer diagnosis and me not being able to do anything like everyone else was able to do. While people were able to go into their bubbles, I wasn't even able to do that. So judging a book by its cover.
Exactly. And I like that. So for me, I write horror, right? So the only rule I have is I will never kill dogs in a book. Simple as that. Cats, I love cats too, but I don't know that I feel the same about cats in a book as I do dogs. So we'll see if it ever gets to that. But that's the only rule I've got. Everything else, if anybody reads my books and they're offended, I'm sorry. I wrote a fictional novel or novella for the first ones. If they offend you, hey, I'm sorry. Don't stop reading it. In fact, I was reading one book the other day. And it wasn't about politics. It was about like a haunted house type thing. And about 3 chapters in, the person was at lunch and they started talking about the protesters who were next door. Had nothing to do with the story whatsoever. They just wanted to spend a whole chapter talking about the protesters. And to be honest, I don't even remember if I agreed or disagreed with what they were protesting, but it just took me out of the story because I'm like, I don't want to read about that in a non-political book that had nothing to do with that whatsoever. So my advice to people is to be true to yourself, right? And as you write your stories and true to your characters, true to the genre, do the research if you're writing something like John's with historical fiction and things like that. But just be yourself. And if you have to apologize to somebody at a dinner party, apologize. But other than that. Okay, so one other question I've got. And I think that I heard you, Aaron, mention this, and I know, John, you have before, is how important are beta readers?
Oh.
So for me personally, my beta reader was also my editor. So as long as it scared her at night, I was happy with the horror novel. So she was my beta reader / editor. And everything's, I'm trying to tell a good story. So, but for you all, and for me, maybe going forward, how important do you find beta readers and do you get good feedback?
I'll take that first, if you don't mind.
Don't mind at all.
I wrote my first novel totally ignorant of, I barely even knew to call them beta readers. I knew that I needed some feedback. I needed something pre-publication that said, hey, this is an engaging story, keep going, or hey, this is total crap, no one's going to want to read this, this wasted my time, go do something else. I guess I had heard the term beta reader. I didn't know what the rules were. I don't know if there are really any hard, fast rules. I heard that maybe 3 really good beta readers is good. I had 15. Maybe that's too much, but I will justify that in saying that some people gave me tons and tons of feedback, which was great. Some people said they read the book and they, quote, liked it. Is that person a beta reader? Sure. They took time out of their day to read my book pre-publication. They liked it. Lots of feedback, everything in between. And I mentioned them all in the acknowledgments. I thought that was the right thing to do. And I was very grateful to find people that were actually wanting to take the journey with me, that first step to do this first book. And like I said, I mentioned them by name in my acknowledgments, and only 2 are actually related to me. So the fact that 13 are not related to me, I thought was terrific. Now, will I have as many on the second one? Probably not. I did find that some people that were very, very helpful and gave me lots of feedback. Naturally, I will want to go back to them because they're engaged with me. They seem to like my writing. They gave me very good ideas and very good feedback. The folks that were hey, Cord, I liked it, maybe not so much on the second one because maybe that wasn't their thing or maybe it wasn't their genre or whatever. I probably will cut down on the number. I don't know if there needs to be a rule. I think that the rule should be as many readers as you need feedback to make the very best novel that you can. So will it be 15 the next time? Maybe it'll be more. I don't know. But I love beta readers. I love sensitivity readers. I love anybody that actually wants to take an interest in my book before it's published, because that way I think I'm doing the very best that I can for the future readers that are not related to me or they're none of my friends or they're not previous beta readers. I'm putting the very best thing that I can out there, and no feedback in my mind is too small. Hey, you liked it? Great. Oh, you want to give me a novel's worth of feedback? Even better, So nice. That's just me.
I like that. Harriet, Aaron, any thoughts on beta readers?
I didn't have as many as John, but having been in a profession where I had a lot of peer review, I really appreciate comments on my writing, and so I'm very amenable to giving it to people to read and accepting them, and I usually do accept all suggestions because I figure that's the reason I ask them, So I was this time I was very, very pleased with the beta readers I had. I like that they, I like their suggestions. I think whatever they told me made my book better. And in fact, that was actually one of the reasons I did some revisions in my first book, because one of my beta readers who had read my first book actually made some suggestions about that, post editing. So that was actually, it was almost like a bonus. So I think it's always useful to have people read it. I like John's idea. I think I might ask more people in the future, but it's always a little touchy because it's, you don't want to impose on people, and you want to find people who really do want to do it, because it's a big ask, particularly if you have a long book. It's a lot. It's asking someone to spend a lot of time and a lot of effort and thought. But I think it's definitely, it's always beneficial.
Awesome. That's great. How about you, Aaron? Do you do betas?
Yes. At this point, I have about 3 people I consistently use as my betas for each book now. And I've had other people, but and definitely one of the ones who's like, I liked it. But which, of course, you can always follow up with them. You can give them a questionnaire. And sometimes they just need you to ask them something and be like, well, what did you think of this character? Or did you think this was okay? And sometimes they just need a little nudge to give you what you need. And I know some people they make questionnaires that they provide with their beta that they fill out when they're done. Not everyone likes filling those out, but they're great for getting information, especially if there's something you're not sure about. But I've not forgot. One thing I do like to be careful about with beta readers is I tend to have other authors, other writers who are my beta readers, which are awesome because they give great feedback, but also they like you then to beta read their work. Exactly. Which is great. And I love doing it, but it takes a lot of time. So that's another reason why I don't ask a lot of people who I know would do it, but it's just like, but do I want to feel like I need to reciprocate? And I'd rather ARC read and do an advanced reader copy myself and just leave a review than, because I feel I'm one of those people who's going to want to leave lots of information and comments and stuff on my betas and just take it too far, like every little comment on everything. So you got to be really careful and just of your time as well.
Nice. So Chris, did you do beta readers? And then after Chris answers, what I'd like to do is have just everybody ask, any questions that they've got, or if there's any advice you have for new authors, and we'll do the answers and questions on the next round as a sort of a speed round, so that we end this thing on fairly close to time. We could go over. I could talk all night, but I'd like to know from Chris what he's had, and then so while Chris is answering, everyone else can think of either questions or something that might help a new author or an author who's stuck for our original topic. So, Mr. Chris Brown.
So I'm going to sort of answer the last question and this question at the exact same time. Don't get your beta reader to be your husband because they will say they've read the book. They will not read the book. They will say that they've read it over. They will say, oh, it was great. They have so many great opinions on your book. And then when you go and send it to your editor, the editor will then charge you an arm and a leg, send it back to you, and then you'll publish it. And then you'll get this random review from the first people who buy it and say, why did you write this part? Or why did you write that part? So yeah, I wish I had 15 people that I would have been able to get to read it over. I wish I knew about this writing community on Twitter before publishing, because I think I would have taken a little bit more time. But when it was published, I got two people. I told them that it was published. I didn't tell everyone because I just wanted to see what the process was like when people bought it on Amazon. And they got it, and then they read it, and they told me, did you mean to say this, or did you mean to say that? So I was like, crap. And then I told my husband, who was supposed to read it, and he let me know that no, he did not read it. And he then read it after the second and third versions of the book got published. So yeah, just I wish maybe book 2. I'll send it to all 4 of you. Then I'll read yours.
Yeah, that's fine. No worries.
No, I didn't know the word beta reader what that meant, and I had to look it up quickly. And then everyone was like, "Oh, they proofread it." I'm like, "Oh." So like what my husband was supposed to do, but he didn't.
Well, there's different levels too. I just want to set, there's alpha readers, there's beta readers, there's ARC readers. Alpha, I think, is very early on. You haven't even necessarily finished the book, but you want to kind of get some feedback. Beta means that it's basically finished. Of course, you're editing. You can never do enough editing, and you want to kind of make sure that you squash all the obvious types of grammatical type things. But if there's anything that's out of place with continuity or anything that doesn't make sense, that's not time to do it. And then there's ARC readers, which is advanced reader copies. This is something that you're very close to publication. You're out of the beta stage. You're not going to be making major revisions. But if anything comes up, you miss a comma, or there's an errant word, out of 100,000 words, I promise you, I read my novel about 1,000 times. You still can't catch everything. You want eyeballs on that thing, because there are some crazy people out there that as soon as they see one errant misspelled word, then they've totally trashed the entire indie community. Never mind the fact that big 6 published novels typically on average have about 10 errors per 100,000 words. Doesn't matter. If you're wrong with one word, the entire industry is trash. So, exactly. But there's different levels of pre-publication reading, and I would actually encourage someone involved at every stage. You never can have enough feedback before it gets published.
Awesome. And since we started with Chris and John on the introductions, we're going to go out with Aaron and Harriet. And what I'd like to say, Aaron, on yours is, again, appreciate you being here. We're going to still do a goodbye segment, but I'd just like to start with you first, either on your final question for the group, or something you think might help other indie authors or new authors, and feel free to do both. It doesn't have to be limited.
I will just mention something I did recently that helped me get out of a rut, even though I did have a story. So it's not coming up with a book, but when I was having trouble writing, it had been after summer and I hadn't had to spend as much time writing. I started doing writing sprints, and I would take a timer and get it set for like 20 minutes. And I open up my book and I just have to write. Like, I start the timer and go. So if I get to something, it's like, I need to look up, or I don't have a name for this, I put a little placeholder in it, a little, like, capitalized word, capitalized name, keep going, just keep writing. And, and then I stop, and then I see how many words I get, and I make a little note, because I like to make notes of those things. And then I, do a little dance break or whatever and do something else. And then, come back and then set it again and just do it. And that actually, like, it wasn't something I'd done before, but I found for like a week that really helped me get going again. And then I kind of got back into the feel of it and I let it go to the side. Like this didn't have to be my always thing, but just little things like that. It was a fun way to kind of get my brain going again.
Nice. I love it. That's a perfect idea for that. I mean, it's something that those writing sprints, it's a great idea, and writing consistently, right? I think that's something we would all agree with is finding the time that you're going to write. Yeah. If I was a full-time author, maybe I would be writing at, 9 a.m. or whatever all the way through. But for me, I start writing about 9 o'clock at night, and then I finish at whenever the juices stop flowing. Sometimes it's 9:03. But if I can be consistent on that when I'm writing and do that helps. Harriet, so for you, a final question and or final thing that you think may help other authors, or both. So.
Well, the only I did have a question for John and Aaron in writing fiction, and that would be, how do you arrive at your topics? Like John, that was such a unique period of time and a unique story. What prompted you to explore that? And Aaron, doing all the different genres, how do you come up with those ideas? And the one little tidbit I'm going to just sort of throw out there, because I found this is valuable to me, not necessarily in coming up with ideas, but once I've written something, because I years and years ago, I wrote poetry and I like music, I read it out loud. And I recently found a program on my word program that reads it out loud for you, which because after reading a book out loud, you're not going to be able to talk for a couple of days. But it's so valuable to hear the words, because if you missed a word, if it doesn't sound right, you'll think about, well, what word can I substitute that has that syntax, that has that just the feeling of verse. And I found that was such a rewarding way to go through it. It just sort of changed my whole perspective on a lot of it. So that was my tidbit, and that's my question. So thank you.
Awesome. So before John, you take it, and then Aaron, on the reading back, I had an author tell me one time that they would go to a local theater group and offer to buy them pizza if they could have people read sections of their book, but they wanted to make sure it flowed properly, like the dialogues, things like that.
Perfect.
And they would buy the pizza, they would give it to them, give them the sections of the book, then they would come back the next week after they'd had a chance to study and read it. And he said it was so much fun.
That's so great.
That it just worked for the dialogue. So I haven't done that yet, but I may. So John, go ahead. Sorry to jump in the middle.
So Harry, I love your question, by the way. In a roundabout way, Russian historical fiction was not on my radar ever. Actually, I with the exception of what I would consider to be Russian fiction. Everybody's heard of War and Peace and Dostoevsky and Crime and Punishment. I wasn't really involved in that genre. And in fact, if you had asked me 10 or 15 or 20 years ago, I would have probably bet my bottom dollar that my first novel or serious length story would be in the science fiction realm. But in the last couple decades, I'm a huge World War II historian. I love that time period. And even more esoteric, I love within World War II, what is called the Eastern Front. This is the war between Germany and the USSR. The reason they called it the Eastern Front, it was the Eastern Front of Germany. If you were in Russia, front. But if you look up World War II Eastern Front battles, that's between Germany and the USSR. And I studied a bunch about that. And so I thought it was sort of a natural fit that when I wrote my first serious long piece of fiction, that it would take place in Russia, because I've done a lot of that research to start and to kind of kickstart that story. I don't exactly know when it was, but I was watching a documentary about what is called the House on the Embankment. That is the apartment complex, the flats that were constructed specifically for the Soviet elite. Joseph Stalin had all of his ministers and high-level functionaries and all his generals and everybody that was important in the regime living literally in one apartment complex. Now, you might think, well, why would he do that? Yes, they were very luxurious compared to everyone else. Well, he was a very paranoid individual, and he wanted to keep everyone under surveillance all at the same time. And the best way to do that would be to have them live in the same place. They were literally under surveillance 24/7. So to answer your question, Harriet, I didn't think it was going to be Russian historical fiction, but that sort of grew out from my interest in World War II and specifically the Eastern Front of World War II. So
nice. Aaron?
My first book was definitely, I think it's very reflective of what I was reading at that time in my life. Like, I read a lot of Melanie Cellier fairy tale, but YA, but with a heavy fantasy field in their own worlds. And I was just reading and reading. I mean, I read, if you think I read a lot now, and I read a lot now, I read a lot before I started writing, like really getting into writing and just like devouring these series after series. And I feel like my first book, it has my own unique spin and it's got like its fresh take, but it also is probably my most traditional book where if you follow the storyline, like you can see those favorite tropes and those favorite ideas that just came from all those stories that I read. So, and then I kind of put it in my own way and it got that first book out and then it kind of took off on its own, you know, with the series and where I went from there. But I think, yeah, what I read had played just a huge factor in that first one. And then doing stuff like, and then even just the writing community is what got me into like the Gothic horror and stuff like that. Cause I met people from Quill and Crow and they were cool. And I wasn't into Gothic horror, but I tried their magazine. I'm like, this is pretty cool. And then I'm like, I'm going to try one of their short stories. And then so I'm like, I really like this and it's really fun to write. So, I mean, it's just kind of spirals from there, I guess.
I just backed that Kickstarter, by the way.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah,
cool.
For me, the reason I got into horror, I think, you know, other than just having a lifelong affinity for it, was I was commuting for years and I used to listen to something called Pseudopod, where it was just these stories that you could get, you know, and it was all in a 45-minute chunk of horror, and it was just perfect. So let's continue around here. Let's go to John St. Clair. And if you can let us know either your last little tidbit or last question for the group.
Don't have a question. I have a great tidbit. And this gets back to something that if you've been listening this long, and I thank you if you have, because we've been talking a while. So thank you so much for sticking with us. But you may have heard me or other folks refer to this writing community. I'm sure there are lots of writing communities out there, but when I say that, I specifically mean the Twitter writing community. And even within that, there are thousands of independently published authors, of which I probably interact with maybe a couple hundred regularly, but even smaller than that, very regularly, maybe a dozen or two. But this is a community of really fabulous people that I wish I had been involved with a couple years leading up to when I published my first novel. I likely would have avoided a whole bunch of landmines, potholes, problems, traps. I could have avoided a whole bunch of things just by listening, observing, engaging. The engagement is really what gets it for me. You're talking to people that are just like you. They have a full-time job. They're writing on the side. Maybe they even write full-time. Who knows? They maybe haven't published anything. Maybe they have 20 books out. There's always something to learn. The folks are super, super nice. That you can engage with them. You can ask them questions. You can read their works. They will read your works. If you have new stuff coming out, they'll promote it. You can promote their stuff. It's just a really, really great community that I have found. I was on Twitter before I published my first book, but I wasn't using it every day. Now I'm on there every day. I've met everyone that I interact with. And I just think it's the best thing right now. And I'm super grateful that I found the folks that I interact with, because they're just like you. They're struggling. They're trying to make a living. They're trying to write a really good story. And everybody has been very accommodating. They share information. They'll read your stuff. And you're not going to get that anywhere else. Maybe there's a local group you go to. Maybe you can meet people at Starbucks, but for the biggest bang for the buck, for the biggest return on your investment was just a couple hours a day. You can really meet some fabulous people, and I am blessed that I have found this community, and I am one of its largest cheerleaders. And I would invite you, if you don't know who to interact with, join the Twitter writing community, and you will find your people.
Yeah, and John, you and I actually met on Twitter, I believe.
Yeah, everybody on this phone call is
exactly
related to Twitter writing.
And I'm going to be following Harriet and Aaron next.
Yeah, obviously, David. So I mean, there's that connection too. So
exactly, and the big thing for me is I'm on the hashtag writing community. That's one I go to. I go to the Am writing when I'm writing at night, and I also publish to my weird friends on the Am writing horror. Other than those, are there any other writing group hashtags or Facebook groups? Even we won't be prejudiced against them, but are there for Aaron, for Harriet or Chris? I don't know. Are y'all on any other hashtags that would be good for us to know about?
I'll throw one out. I know I've done a lot of talking. Do also Am reading. As opposed to writing community or Am writing. The Am reading, there are a bunch of readers on Twitter. Nice. This is great. If you're a writer, you need readers. Trust me. There are some folks that love to read and couldn't write to save their life. Nice. Nothing wrong with that. I love readers. I'm a reader. Everyone on this call is a reader. Nice. If you're only into reading, more power to you, because you're my people. I need readers. And so if you go to Am Reading, people all the time will say, hey, I have a spare $50 gift card on Amazon. Give me some recommendations. People will come out of the woodwork to plug their books. I think that's fantastic. And I've made so many book sales just by putting a cover shot of my novel up there and a short description. They'll say, hey, this sounds right up my alley. I'll go buy it today. I've made probably 100 sales just that easily. That's so awesome. Look for hashtag Am Reading as well. People love to read, and they loved asking on Twitter for recommendations.
That's awesome. So to Mr. Christopher Brown, any questions or last tidbits or both for the crew?
No questions, because like everyone said, we've been here a long time, and hopefully people are still with us. I'm assuming people are still with us, because my mom will probably watch this and tell me how I did wrong or what I should have said more importantly. But
hi, Chris's mom.
Exactly. More importantly is this. For those who are writing, read. Buy someone else's book and read it. I have learned so much writing style, writing from reading independent authors, reading authors. And I can tell you that the biggest challenge that I always have is where to start, and reading other people's works and learning from them and learning their writing style has been the biggest sort of blessing that I've gotten over the last few years. I can tell you that I will be going out to Amazon once this phone call is done, and I will be buying 3 new books. I already have David's book, so I'm not going to be buying his, but I will be buying Harriet's books, John's books, and
thank you.
And Aaron's books as well, just because I always like to read. And for those also who have just published the first book, I know how hard it is. Mm-hmm. Marketing is key. Twitter is your friend, but marketing is key. I would be honored to have any one of these authors. I've had David on a few times on my podcast. We have amazing reach here in Canada. If you want to have a Canadian marketplace where you'd be able to come on and pitch your book, happy to have you on. So find your local podcast, because that's how David and I got connected, was through a podcast website. He came on, and we've been best friends since. And he kind of, without sort of letting him know, but he was sort of the instrument of me sort of writing, because I wanted to write, and he was one of the 2 authors that reached out to me, and I said, okay, let's do it. And I read I listened to his first book, because I like to listen to books as well when I'm out walking or sitting in a chair getting poison pumped through your body through chemotherapy appointments. So I would highly recommend reaching out, because you can do so much. Even if you sell 1 book by talking for 20 minutes with a podcast, it does work. So that's my shameless plug with that. So read. And also, hold on. One last statement here, because this is the big one. get verified editors. So David and I were going through the process. I was going to get his cousin to help me, but I found someone else online. Don't just assume people online have your best interest for you, because they will take your money and run. And they will send you back with like 4 edits and go, oh, it was perfect. And then you publish and go, wait, that's not where the comma is supposed to go. And that's not where the apostrophe is supposed to go.
Yep.
Find verified people out there. There are good resources, and ask authors who they've used, so that way you can get the best product out there. So there's my tidbit for it.
No, I like both. And so for me, my tidbit was exactly what you said. Get on a podcast. Contact Chris. For everybody on this call, contact Chris. Get on his show.
I'll be following every single one of you on Twitter after.
Awesome. Thank you. Yes.
It's fun. It's if you don't want to talk specifically about your specific genre, which I'm his official horror consultant, talk about other things. There's a lot of stuff. And I, a lot of stuff recently has been on politics on Chris's show. And I enjoy that because I know nothing about Canadian politics, but it's just fun to hear that they're as messed up as we are. But regardless of that,
we're just nice about it.
Yeah, exactly. Oh. So I appreciate everybody being on the call today. We're going to go around again real quick so everybody can say their name, hold up their books, and all that good fun stuff. Appreciate again everybody being on here. I can't wait to read some of your works as well and talk to you on the Twitterverse. So just go ahead. Let's start at the top on my screen, Harriet. If you can do your sign off and plug your book, and we'll go to Aaron and John and Chris.
Well, again, thank you very, very much. Thanks to John, who turned me on to this whole thing. David, thank you. I have met John and Aaron through Twitter and other people. It's been the greatest thing. I have to tell you, I am so grateful. And it's just been a fabulous experience. Chris, it's so nice to meet you. Chris, I used to live in Canada. And I have such a warm spot for it. So again, thank you all, David particularly, for hosting this and including me. Here's my book. It's got a weird name, Fee Simple Conditional. It's a type of ownership of real estate.
Right.
That's people go, what is that? That's what it means. And it's part of the plot. And my second novel is called Clear and Convincing Evidence, which makes a little more sense. So it'll be out soon, and I look forward to reading everybody's work. And again, many, many thanks. And I'm just I'm filled with gratitude and affection for all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And Aaron?
I'm EP Stavs. And first off, I've read Harriet's book, and I'm very much looking forward to the second one. Same with John's. They're both so good. So if anyone, they should definitely check this out. I will show my most recent one, and I only have my proof copy upstairs with me, but it's Rest in Peace, Viola Winkle. It came out in August. It's a mashup of like Rip Van Winkle meets Beauty and the Beast with some Celtic fantasy and just fantasy vibes going on. And I had a lot of fun with it. And also I'll be at Geek Girl Con next Saturday, which will be November 5th. I don't know when this comes out, but I'll be there, and I'll be at booth 619 at the Seattle Convention Center if anyone's going to be in the area.
I will try to get this out very, very soon. With that said, what state is that con in?
That's in Washington. It's at the Seattle Convention Center.
I didn't think to ask where everybody
Geek Girl
was.
Con.
Nice. Girl Con. I love it. I didn't think to ask where everybody was, right? So maybe I'll put that in the bios. You can let me know as well, just so if you are doing something local or local events, which, we didn't talk about how important events like that are, but it's something where that helps get your name out there. So anything that gets your name out there is great. So appreciate you and Harriet both being on. John, it's old hat. You're on here all the time. No, just kidding. I appreciate it, John. You always bring such wonderful people to the call. I mean, I brought Chris, but you brought wonderful people.
Thank you.
And, with that said, please do your sign off and let us know your works.
So here's my book again. I I don't know. Is this coming out? Can you read this, or is it mirror image? Because when you hold up your books, it's good. Okay, so it's called Stalin's Door. It's on Amazon. David will put all the information in the podcast errata, or however that works. But check that out. I'm UU Saint on Twitter. I'm pretty active. I'm on there every day. Probably too much, but I've met some wonderful people. Obviously, Harriet and Harriet, I know from our book club. And Chris, it was very nice to meet you. I have been to Canada proudly twice. I did St. John's in Newfoundland for a week. And then on the other coast, I did Vancouver for a week. And if you want to talk Canadian politics, I'm actually a huge fan of Prime Minister's Questions Time, which I loved watching when I was in Canada. That sort of mirrors the British Parliament Prime Minister's Questions Time. I think that's a neat parliamentary way to actually grill the person in charge. And trust me, they do grill them, and they don't hold back. And I think it's just really engaging television for me. So if you want to talk Canadian politics or British politics or any politics, I'm your guy. I'll probably look you up to get on your podcast because I want to talk about my book. But thank you for coming to David's show here. And David, thank you for doing this. It's the third or fourth one I've done, and I'd love to do it again. Let's do it again soon, and I'll invite other people, whomever. We can have a whole bunch of people, and I could easily talk about writing and the writing community and great authors that I've met all night long. But thank you for having us. And I want to just say thank you for doing this.
Oh, you're very welcome. And I think what we may do for the next topic, because I am going to do these more often. I did buy Zoom for a year.
Yeah. So well, then let's get your money's worth.
Let's get our money's worth.
Do it.
And I think what would be fun is, and Aaron, you and Harriet are both invited back. Chris, I don't know. I guess you can come too. But list, maybe we discuss our favorite indie authors.
Oh, let's do it. Oh,
I've got one that, and I can't remember her name right now, but her book was a first person story told from the spider's perspective.
Wow.
And it was just very interesting how, at first you're hearing about somebody killing all her young and all her kids and all this kind of stuff. And you're going, what's going on? And then you find out it's a spider.
It's a spider. Nice.
And the spider decides to take revenge. And I'm like, oh, that's awesome story. But anyway, it's sort of one of those, just a dystopian type thing, right? So let's go to Mr. Christopher Brown. And as we all know, get on a podcast, get on Christopher's show as well. And so if you'd like to do your sign off and show your book, I'd very much appreciate it.
Awesome. I feel like we're expanding David's head with all the thank yous for doing this, but I'm going to keep it going here for a second. David, thank you so much for doing this. This has been an honor to sit around and sort of talk about writing and sort of that stale moment that I have right now of writing my second book. Yes, there will be a second book. I can't wait for my mom and dad to call me up and say, and hopefully my husband will read it this time. But my first one is to Just Keep Talking, Lockdown, Podcasting, and Health. Yes, it's the print copy that I got through Amazon. There is an actual copy upstairs, but it's the only one I have in my book right now, in my office right now. You can find me on all the social media platforms, Cross Border Podcast or Cross Border Interviews with Chris Brown. Check it out. Highly recommend you reach out if you want to come on, talk about anything, whether it be your book or whatever. Happy to do that. And also, I'm going to be in Calgary, Alberta, my hometown. Like I'm not going to some fancy Comic Con or expo that Aaron's going to. So I wish you the best, Aaron. I wish you the best, John. I wish you the best, Harriet. And David, thank you so much for doing this. I'm looking forward to reading all your books, and I'm looking forward to enjoying this new Twitter writing verse that
come on down. Yeah.
Join us.
Join us.
Thank
yes.
You. So I appreciate everybody being on here. You're all invited whenever we have another show. I'll post it on Twitter. John will contact you. We'll have other people's. I do like the idea of that topic for the next one. Our independent authors.
Love it.
Maybe we bring two, our independent and our commercial author. Right? Maybe we're disappointed with some of their later work after they've had 500 novels, Stephen King. But anyway, we can talk about that. My book, the latest published, is called Living Death, and it's a first-person zombie story because I got so much pleasure out of zombie stories in my life that I had to give something back. and it's one where it's just, you know, a person finds out that he's going to die and it pisses him off, and then he finds out the world's dying and he doesn't really care. But he goes through and he finds stuff to care about, and it's actually a love story, believe it or not. So it's a zombie love story, and hopefully people will check it out. Definitely, everybody check the show notes for everybody's links. Look us all up on Twitter, Facebook, whatever we have. And please support independent authors by reading, reviewing, and repeating.
Perfect.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.